Eleanor Grayson sat at the edge of her worn velvet armchair, the one her late husband, Thomas, had loved. Its faded green fabric still held the faint scent of his pipe tobacco, a ghost of comfort in her quiet home. At 72, Eleanor's hands, though wrinkled, were steady as she folded the letter she'd received that morning. The words, written in her daughter-in-law Clara's sharp, angular script, stung like a fresh wound. Eleanor, we think it's best if you don't join us for dinner this Thanksgiving. It's a small gathering, and we want to keep things simple. I'm sure you understand. Understand. Eleanor's chest tightened. For 30 years, she'd hosted Thanksgiving at her oak dining table, the one Thomas had built with his own hands. Every year, her son, Michael, brought his laughter, his appetite, and later, his wife, Clara. The table had seen spilled wine, shared stories, and the warmth of family until Clara decided Eleanor's presence was too much. Too much what? Too old. Too opinionated. Too tied to a past Clara seemed eager to erase. Eleanor set the letter down and stared out the window at the autumn leaves piling on her lawn in Willow Creek, a small town where everyone knew her name. She'd raised Michael here, taught him to ride a bike on these cracked sidewalks, and cheered at his football games under the Friday night lights. Now, at 35, Michael was a successful lawyer, married to Clara, a woman whose polished exterior hid a coldness Eleanor couldn't fathom. Clara had never warmed to her, always bristling at Eleanor's stories or her gentle nudges about family traditions. But banning her from Thanksgiving, that was a new low. The ache in Eleanor's heart wasn't just for herself, it was for Michael. She'd seen the hesitation in his eyes last time they spoke, the way he avoided her gaze when Clara mentioned streamlining family events. He hadn't called in weeks. Was he ashamed? Or had Clara's influence grown so strong that he'd let his mother be cast aside? Eleanor stood, her knees creaking but her resolve firm. She wasn't one to wallow. Her mother, God rest her soul, had taught her that self-pity was a luxury for those with no spine. If Clara thought she could erase Eleanor's place in this family, she was mistaken. Eleanor didn't need their table to prove her worth. She'd create her own. The idea sparked as she walked to her kitchen, where the scent of cinnamon and apples lingered from a pie she'd baked yesterday. She'd host her own Thanksgiving dinner. Not just any dinner, one that would remind Willow Creek who Eleanor Grayson was. She'd fill her home with laughter, warmth, and the kind of love Clara's sterile gathering could never match. And maybe, just maybe, Michael would hear about it and remember what family meant. Eleanor pulled out her old address book, its pages yellowed but filled with names of friends, neighbors, and townsfolk who'd shared her life's highs and lows. There was Margaret, the librarian who'd known Eleanor since grade school. Tom, the hardware store owner who'd fixed her porch swing last summer. And even young Sarah, the barista who always slipped an extra cookie into Eleanor's bag. She'd invite them all. And why stop there? Willow Creek's mayor, Helen Ruiz, had always admired Eleanor's community spirit. What if she invited her, too? The thought brought a smile to Eleanor's lips. Clara might have banned her from one dinner, but Eleanor would host one the whole town would talk about. She picked up her phone and started dialing, her voice steady with purpose. Margaret, it's Eleanor. I'm throwing a Thanksgiving dinner, and I won't take no for an answer. By evening, her dining room was a flurry of plans. She dusted off her best china, the set Thomas had bought her for their 10th anniversary, and polished the silverware until it gleamed. She called the local grocer, who promised to deliver fresh turkeys and cranberries. Eleanor's energy surged, fueled by a mix of defiance and hope. This wasn't just about proving Clara wrong, it was about reclaiming her place, her joy, her life. As night fell, Eleanor sat at her table, sketching a seating chart. She imagined the mayor at one end, her warm laugh filling the room, and Sarah at the other, her youthful energy sparking new stories. The empty chair where Michael should have been tugged at her heart. But she pushed the thought aside. This dinner would be a testament to resilience. To the family you choose when the one you're born into falters. She didn't know if Michael would hear about her dinner or if he'd care. But she knew one thing. Clara's rejection had lit a fire in her. Eleanor Grayson wasn't invisible. She was a force, and Willow Creek would see it. Thanksgiving was 4 weeks away, and she had work to do. The next morning, Eleanor woke with the kind of clarity that comes after a night of restless determination. Her kitchen, bathed in soft November light, felt like a battleground where she'd wage her quiet rebellion. She brewed a pot of coffee, its bitter aroma grounding her, and spread her plans across the counter. Invitations needed to be sent, menus finalized, and her home transformed into a stage for the kind of warmth Clara's dinner could never rival. Eleanor's first stop was the Willow Creek post office, where she mailed handwritten invitations on cream-colored stationery. Each note was personal, her cursive looping with care. Join me for a Thanksgiving feast to remember. Bring your stories and your appetite. She imagined Clara's face if she knew Eleanor was inviting half the town. Would it be shock or indifference? Either way, Eleanor didn't care. This was her moment. Back home, she called Mayor Helen Ruiz. Helen, it's Eleanor Grayson. I'm hosting Thanksgiving at my place this year, and I'd love for you to come. Helen's voice crackled with surprise and delight. Eleanor, you know I'm there. Your dinners are legendary. The mayor's enthusiasm fueled Eleanor's resolve. If Helen was in, others would follow. Over the next week, Eleanor's phone buzzed with RSVPs. Margaret promised to bring her famous pecan pie. Tom offered to carve the turkey, joking about his surgical precision with a carving knife. Sarah, the barista, shyly asked if she could bring her guitar to play a few songs. Eleanor's heart swelled. These were her people, the ones who'd seen her through Thomas's illness, Michael's teenage rebellions, and the quiet years since. Clara might have shut her out, but Willow Creek was opening its arms. Eleanor threw herself into preparations. She scrubbed her dining room floor until it shone, hung new curtains in a soft gold that caught the light, and dragged Thomas's old record player into the living room. She pictured the evening, Nat King Cole's voice mingling with the clink of glasses, laughter drowning out the ache of Michael's absence. But that ache lingered, sharp and stubborn. She hadn't heard from him since Clara's letter. Had he agreed to her exclusion? Or was he just too weak to fight? One afternoon, while kneading dough for dinner rolls, Eleanor's thoughts drifted to Michael as a boy. He'd sit at this very counter, sneaking bits of dough when he thought she wasn't looking. She'd loved his mischief, his wide grin. Now, at 35, he was a stranger, molded by Clara's expectations. Eleanor's hands paused, flour dusting her fingers. What had happened to her boy? Had she failed him somehow? Or was this just the price of growing up? She shook off the thought and focused on her menu. Roasted turkey with sage stuffing, mashed potatoes with garlic butter, green beans with almonds, and her signature cranberry chutney. She'd bake 3 pies: pumpkin, apple, and Margaret's picanto, ensure no one left hungry. Each dish was a piece of her history, a defiance of Clara's dismissal. If Eleanor couldn't be at their table, she'd make hers unforgettable. By the second week, word of Eleanor's dinner had spread. At the grocery store, neighbors stopped her to confirm their attendance or offer to bring a dish. Even the local florist, Mrs. Jenkins, insisted on donating a centerpiece of roses and autumn leaves. Eleanor felt a flicker of pride. Clara might have power over Michael's home, but Eleanor had the heart of Willow Creek. One evening, as she arranged chairs around her extended dining table, the phone rang. Her heart leapt, hoping it was Michael. But it was Sarah, the barista, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Grayson, I heard Clara's been talking around town. She said your dinner is, well, a desperate grab for attention." Eleanor's grip tightened on the receiver. Clara was poisoning her name, trying to dim her light. For a moment, anger flared hot and fierce, but Eleanor took a breath. Let Clara talk. Action spoke louder than gossip. "Thank you for telling me, Sarah," Eleanor said, her voice calm but firm. "Let's make this dinner so grand no one will believe her." Sarah laughed, and Eleanor hung up. Her resolve hardened. Clara's words were a challenge, and Eleanor was ready to meet it. As Thanksgiving neared, Eleanor's home began to transform. She strung fairy lights along the porch, their soft glow a beacon for her guests. She polished Thomas's old candelabras, their silver catching the firelight she planned to kindle. Every detail was a declaration. Eleanor Grayson was still here, still vital, still loved. And if Michael couldn't see that, maybe the mayor and the town would remind him. The third week brought a chill to Willow Creek, but Eleanor's home radiated warmth. Her kitchen was a symphony of aromas: roasting garlic, simmering stock, and the sweet tang of cranberries bubbling on the stove. She moved with purpose, her silver hair tied back, her apron dusted with flour. The dinner was no longer just a response to Clara's slight. It was a celebration of everything Eleanor had built over her 72 years. But beneath her bustling energy, a quiet fear gnawed. Would Michael ever know what he'd lost by letting Clara push her away? One morning, while arranging Mrs. Jenkins' floral centerpiece, Eleanor heard a knock at the door. It was Tom, the hardware store owner, his arms laden with a crate of apples. "Thought you could use these for an extra pie?" he said with a grin. Eleanor's eyes softened. Tom had been Thomas's best friend, and his presence felt like a nod from her late husband. "You're a lifesaver, Tom," she said, and they spent the afternoon peeling apples, swapping stories of old Willow Creek. His laughter eased the ache in her chest, if only for a moment. As the guest list grew, Eleanor realized her dining room, even with the table extended, couldn't hold everyone. She decided to spill the party into her backyard, where Thomas's old oak tree stood sentinel. She borrowed tables from the community center, draped them in white linens, and set up heaters to ward off the November chill. The backyard, with its fairy lights and rustling leaves, would be an extension of her heart, open, warm, and unyielding. But not everyone was thrilled about her plans. At the library, Margaret pulled Eleanor aside, her face tight with worry. "I heard Clara's been telling people you're trying to upstage her. She's invited some big-shot clients to her dinner, and she's livid you're stealing her thunder." Eleanor's jaw clenched. Clara's dinner was about impressing strangers, not nurturing family. The contrast only fueled Eleanor's determination. "Let her be livid," she said. "I'm not hosting to compete. I'm hosting to connect." That evening, Eleanor sat down to finalize the guest list. 22 people had RSVP'd, including the mayor, a retired schoolteacher, a young couple from church, and even the town's new deputy sheriff. Each name was a thread in the tapestry of her life, a reminder that family wasn't just blood, it was the people who showed up. Still, Michael's absence loomed like a shadow. She'd mailed him an invitation, a simple note saying, "You're always welcome at my table." No response. The silence cut deeper than Clara's letter. To distract herself, Eleanor focused on the details. She planned a toast to honor Thomas, whose memory would linger in every dish. She chose a playlist of jazz and folk, songs that had filled their home during happier times. She even practiced her welcome speech, standing in front of her mirror, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. What if no one came? What if Clara's whispers turned the town against her? Those fears dissolved when Sarah arrived the next day, her guitar slung over her shoulder. "I wrote a song for the dinner," she said, her cheeks pink with nerves. She played a soft melody, her lyrics weaving a story of community and resilience. Eleanor's eyes misted over. "Sarah, that's beautiful," she said, pulling the young woman into a hug. In that moment, Eleanor felt the weight of her purpose. This dinner wasn't just for her, it was for everyone who'd ever felt pushed aside, overlooked, or forgotten. As the days ticked down, Eleanor's home became a hub of activity. Neighbors dropped off folding chairs, extra plates, and bottles of wine. The mayor called to confirm, promising to bring her homemade cornbread. Even the local newspaper caught wind of the event, and a reporter asked to cover it. Eleanor hesitated. She didn't want this to be about spectacle but agreed, hoping the story might reach Michael. By the night before Thanksgiving, Eleanor's house was ready. The tables were set, the lights twinkled, and the air hummed with anticipation. She stood in her backyard, hands on her hips, surveying her work. The oak tree's branches swayed gently, as if Thomas were watching, proud. Eleanor whispered to the night air, "This is for us, love, and for Michael, if he'll see it." Tomorrow, she'd open her doors to Willow Creek, and no band from Clara could dim the light she'd shine. Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and golden, the sky a canvas of soft blues and oranges. Eleanor woke early, her heart a mix of nerves and excitement. She slipped into her favorite dress, a deep burgundy that complemented her silver hair, and pinned a small brooch Thomas had given Hera, a tiny silver oak leaf. It felt like armor, a reminder of her strength. Today, she'd host a dinner that would echo through Willow Creek, a testament to love and resilience. The kitchen was a whirlwind of activity. Eleanor basted 2 turkeys, their skin crisping to a perfect golden brown. The oven hummed with pies, and the stovetop bubbled with her cranberry chutney, its tart sweet scent filling the air. Neighbors arrived early to help Margaret with her pecan pie, Tom with his carving knife, and Mrs. Jenkins adjusting the floral centerpiece. Their chatter and laughter wove a warmth that Clara's sterile letter could never touch. By noon, the backyard was transformed. Tables stretched across the grass, draped in white linens and adorned with candles and roses. Fairy lights twinkled in the oak tree's branches, casting a soft glow. Sarah tuned her guitar in the corner, her nervous energy infectious. Eleanor paused to take it all in, her chest swelling with pride. This was her defiance, her heart laid bare for the town to see. Guests began arriving at 3, their voices a chorus of excitement. The retired schoolteacher, Mr. Thompson, brought a bottle of homemade cider. The young couple from church, Emily and Mark, offered a tray of cornbread stuffing. Mayor Helen Ruiz arrived in a tailored blazer, her smile wide as she hugged Eleanor. "You've outdone yourself, Eleanor," she said, surveying the scene. Eleanor's throat tightened. "I just wanted to bring us together," she replied. As the tables filled, Eleanor scanned the crowd for Michael. She'd left his invitation open, hoping he'd show. But his absence was a quiet ache, like a missing note in a familiar song. She pushed it aside and raised a glass for her welcome toast. "To family," she said, her voice clear and strong. "The ones we're born with and the ones we choose. Thank you for being here." The guests cheered, their warmth wrapping around her like a blanket. Dinner was a triumph, Plates piled high with turkey, stuffing, and mashed potatoes passed from hand to hand. Stories flowed as freely as the wine tales of past Thanksgivings, childhood pranks, and Willow Creek's quirky history. Sarah's song, played under the oak tree, brought tears to Margaret's eyes. Even the deputy sheriff, a stoic man, cracked a smile as he recounted his first day on the job. Eleanor moved among her guests, refilling glasses, sharing laughs, and soaking in the joy of connection. But as the evening deepened, a shadow fell. Clara's words, relayed by Sarah, echoed in Eleanor's mind, a desperate grab for attention. She glanced at the empty chair she'd set for Michael, its silence louder than the laughter around her. Had she gone too far? Was this dinner, as grand as it was, just a way to mask her pain? She shook off the doubt, but it lingered, a crack in her resolve. Then, the mayor stood to speak. Eleanor Grayson, Helen began, her voice carrying over the crowd. You remind us what community means. This dinner isn't just a meal, it's a gift. To resilience. To love. To you. The guests erupted in applause, and Eleanor's eyes stung with tears. She hadn't realized how much she needed those words, how much she'd feared being forgotten. As dessert was served, slices of pumpkin, apple, and pecan pie, the reporter from the local paper approached. Mrs. Grayson, this is the event of the season. Mind if I take a few photos? Eleanor nodded, her heart full. The camera flashed, capturing the glow of the candles, the smiles of her guests, and the strength in her own face. She hoped Michael would see the article, hoped it would stir something in him. As the night wound down, guests lingered, reluctant to leave the warmth of Eleanor's home. They hugged her, thanked her, and promised to return next year. Eleanor stood on her porch, waving as cars pulled away, the fairy lights still twinkling. She'd done it. She'd hosted a dinner that outshone Clara's cold exclusion. But as she turned back to her empty house, the victory felt bittersweet. Michael hadn't come. The mayor's presence, the town's love, these were treasures. But they couldn't fill the hole her son had left. The morning after Thanksgiving, Eleanor woke to a quiet house. The tables were still in the backyard, littered with crumbs and empty glasses. She smiled at the mess. It was proof of the night's success. Her phone buzzed with messages from guests, thanking her for the warmth, the food, the memories. The local paper's online edition already had a glowing article, with photos of her laughing under the oak tree, the mayor raising a glass, and Sarah strumming her guitar. Eleanor Grayson's Thanksgiving Triumph. The headline read. She saved the link, hoping Michael would see it. But as she cleaned, the silence grew heavy. She'd poured her heart into the dinner, and it had been everything she'd hoped except for one thing. Michael. His absence was a wound that refused to heal. She sat at her kitchen counter, sipping cold coffee, and let herself feel the weight of it. Clara had won that battle, keeping Michael from her. But Eleanor wasn't done fighting. Not for her son, not for herself. She decided to call him. Her fingers trembled as she dialed, but her voice was steady when he answered. Michael, it's Mom. I hosted Thanksgiving last night. The mayor was here, and half the town. I missed you. There was a long pause, and when Michael spoke, his voice was strained. Mom, I didn't know. Clara said it was better this way. Eleanor's heart sank, but she pressed on. There's always a seat for you here. Michael. Always. He promised to visit soon, but his words felt hollow. The conversation left Eleanor restless. She needed to move, to act. She walked to the town square, where the air was crisp and the streets quiet. At the coffee shop, Sarah greeted her with a hug. Mrs. Grayson, last night was magical. People are still talking about it. Eleanor smiled, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She needed to understand why Clara had pushed her out, why Michael had let it happen. That afternoon, she visited Margaret at the library. Over tea, Eleanor poured out her heart Clara's letter, Michael's silence, the dinner's triumph and its lingering ache. Margaret listened, her eyes kind but sharp. Eleanor, Clara's insecure. You're a force, and she can't handle that. Michael's caught in the middle, but he'll come around. Give him time. Eleanor nodded, but time felt like a luxury she didn't have. Determined to bridge the gap, Eleanor wrote Michael a letter. Not an invitation, not a plea, but a story off the dinner. The laughter, the mayor's toast, and the love that filled her home. I did this for me, she wrote, but also for you, to remind you who we are. She mailed it, hoping it would reach the part of Michael that still remembered their bond. As the days passed, Eleanor kept busy. She returned the borrowed tables, donated leftover food to the community center, and started planning a winter potluck. The town's support hadn't faded. Neighbors stopped by with thank you notes, and the mayor invited her to speak at the next council meeting about community building. Eleanor felt seen, valued, alive. But every night, she checked her phone, hoping for a message from Michael. Nothing. One evening, while sorting through old photos, Eleanor found one of Michael and Thomas under the oak tree, laughing as they raked leaves. She traced their faces, her heart aching. She'd built a life of love and resilience. But losing Michael to Clara's control felt like a failure she couldn't shake. She set the photo down and made a decision. She'd visit him. Not to confront, but to reconnect. She'd bring a slice of leftover pie, a small gesture of the home he'd left behind. The next morning, Eleanor drove to Michael and Clara's house, 30 minutes away in the city. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her nerves a tangle of hope and fear. She knocked on their door, the pie wrapped in foil, her heart pounding. Clara answered, her face a mask of surprise. Eleanor, what are you doing here? Her tone was sharp, but Eleanor stood tall. I came to see my son, she said, her voice unwavering. Michael appeared behind Clara, his expression a mix of guilt and relief. Mom, he said, stepping forward. Clara's eyes narrowed, but Eleanor ignored her, holding out the pie. I saved you some apple, she said. It's your favorite. For a moment, Michael's face softened, and Eleanor saw the boy she'd raised. The road back to him wouldn't be easy, but she'd taken the first step. Michael took the pie, his fingers brushing Eleanor's. The gesture, small as it was, felt like a lifeline. Clara stood rigid, her arms crossed, but Eleanor kept her eyes on her son. Can we talk? She asked. Michael glanced at Clara, then nodded. Let's go for a walk, he said, his voice low. Clara's lips tightened, but she didn't stop him. They walked down the quiet street, the pie still in Michael's hands. The city air felt sharp compared to Willow Creek's softness, but Eleanor's heart was steady. I read about your dinner, Michael said finally. The paper said it was incredible. I'm sorry I wasn't there. His words were heavy with guilt, and Eleanor's chest ached. You could have been, she said gently. My table's always open to you. Michael stopped, his eyes on the ground. Clara thought. She thought it'd be easier without family drama. I didn't know how to argue. Eleanor's heart twisted, but she saw the conflict in his face, the boy she'd raised, trapped by a life he hadn't chosen. Michael, she said, family isn't about avoiding drama. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. He looked at her then, his eyes glistening. I miss you, Mom, I miss us. Eleanor reached for his hand, squeezing it. Then come back, she said. Not just to my table, but to yourself. They stood in silence, the weight of years between them. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. Back at home, Eleanor felt lighter. The dinner had been her triumph, a beacon of her strength. But this moment with Michael was her hope. She knew Clara wouldn't relent easily. But Eleanor had faced worse: Thomas's illness, lonely nights, the sting of rejection. She'd survived it all, and she'd survived this. The town continued to buzz about her Thanksgiving. The mayor invited her to join a community planning committee, and Sarah asked to collaborate on a holiday concert. Eleanor's home, once quiet, was now a hub of connection. She framed the newspaper article and hung it in her dining room, a reminder of what she'd built. But she left Michael's chair empty at her table, a quiet promise that he could return. One evening, as she sat by the fire, her phone pinged. It was a text from Michael. Can I come by next weekend? Just me. Eleanor's heart leapt. She typed back, bring your appetite. She didn't know if Clara would fight it, or if Michael's visit would last. But she knew she'd keep her door open, her table set, her love unwavering. Eleanor leaned back, the fire crackling, and thought of Thomas. He'd be proud not just of the dinner, but of her refusal to let pain define her. She'd turned Clara's rejection into a celebration, and in doing so, she'd reminded Willow Creek, and herself, of her worth. The mayor's toast, Sarah's song, the town's embrace, they were proof that family wasn't just blood. It was the people who saw you, who chose you, who stayed. As winter crept closer, Eleanor planned her next gathering. She'd host a potluck, maybe a New Year's brunch. She'd keep building, keep loving, keep fighting for Michael. Clara might have banned her from one dinner, but Eleanor had created something far greater: a legacy of resilience. A table where everyone was welcome. And in that, she'd found her victory.